Hey everyone, this is Douglas Robinson with Def Edit Software, and today I wanted to talk about one of the really neat new one-step features in Cherwell version 9.7, and that is the ability to write to your local event viewer or your log file. So there's a new one-step action labeled write to log. It's right next to write to file. And basically using this one-step action, you can determine a different log level, and I believe this is used for when you have your server logging to a file or to Splunk or to the Windows event log, for example. You can tell it which levels of logging you want to end up in your log file or in Splunk or in the local event log on someone's client even. Like as a user, you can determine which items end up in your local event log by going to the Tools menu and selecting Options. And on that general page, under Logging, you can click Configure and you can actually see for yourself what's going into a user level log file or to Splunk or to the event log. And so here you get a very similar dropdown. And so this is going to be really neat as you build out different types of one steps because you can have certain events that you're logging and troubleshooting that don't always need to log and troubleshoot. So this is for me going to replace like me putting together variables and journal actions and other stuff like, hey, I need to create a new child business object for a journal, and then I need to put a condition on it to only run when maybe I've got a stored value that flags, hey, I'm testing this, or I have an expression that checks if I'm an admin or something trivial like that where like it's tedious to flip on and off. This is going to make it to where you can have many different actions throughout the system. Like you'll have ideally, this is going to be a new best practice, right? Like, you know how when we send emails and you go in and you say, hey, I'm only going to send an email if the system state expression or current system is equal to dev or not equal to dev, right? This is going to be very similar to that, only you'll be able to just drag a single action right to log and say, hey, the log level of this is debug. I only need this log when my log level is debug. Or it's informational, right? Because debug, you'll get a lot of stuff. But if it's informational, then you'll only see this when you have your log set to informational. And by default, it doesn't do that. So your default logging level in Cherwell as a user or on the server is usually warning and above. So if you have information that a user might need, and let's say they're not going to be in the system analyzer or you don't want to dig through all of that and you want your one steps to be able to log, you can set that to info, for example, at your log level. And then if they need to troubleshoot something, you can have them set log to event log to show info and above. And what that does is it means if they start going through the system and doing various things, if you have coordinated these one-step values or these one-step actions at different points in your system to log either every time or to only log informational stuff, then they can toggle on and off whether they see certain log information. Now you can do certain things if you explicitly want to call out like, hey, this is a warning and I want it to show up every time. We can just type in a warning value and sorry, my user doesn't have an email, I realize, so we'll do display name, just like we'll have a test here, like some text and then, a token. Like you could pass in information from a business object and other things using this action. And if you run this, it'll actually log that value to your Windows event viewer. Now this happens on that client. This happens in the desktop client. I should refresh this screen. So here's what happened. It shows, hey, one step log. Here's the text I put in. Here's the token at the end of it. There's a log level. There's a thread process ID, a host name, which is interesting. I don't know why the host name is useful because this doesn't happen on the server. Like if I go and sign into the server, I don't actually see that. And then there's an SID, which I don't know what that does. But you actually get to log this on the local machine. And so you could go through a series of different logs over time, and you'd be able to see what was happening if you were troubleshooting an issue, or you'd be able to collect those logs for various other purposes. Now, if you go into the browser client and you execute this, it doesn't show up on the local user's machine, of course, because they're in the browser, but it also doesn't show up on the server. So I don't believe this works in the browser. You would have to, you'd have to do whatever you're currently doing. But if you're running something through the automation process engine or through an API, this should end up going through the server. So if you're on your actual server and you have an action that says write to log, you can actually have your automation process engine log various things to the event log because you can't normally track information that's happening on an automation process engine in real time. What you'd end up doing is creating many different journals at various points and then looking through those journals, whereas many of us might be used to just looking at event logs. So this can be useful if you have a lot of information about an automation process engine that you're trying to track. But yeah, that's basically it. You can just add write to log one-step actions at various points in different processes, and then you can use this if you want to get very, complex with it to allow for troubleshooting of various processes for your users, either all the time or to allow informational, like debugging information to show up when they decide that they need to be able to display that information, log info and above, things like that. Hopefully I covered that pretty well. Let us know if you have any questions or comments or concerns, or if I missed anything about the new write to log feature, and subscribe and catch all of our other videos. Thanks.